The great crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber stretched high above the gathered delegates. Sunlight from 3 different stars filtered through the walls, casting rainbow patterns across the curved floor. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in the human section, her simple gray uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and armor worn by the other species around her. For 300 years, humans had held this seat. For 300 years, they had been the voice of reason when the galaxy threatened to tear itself apart. Today, Sarah knew, would be different. The Veltar hegemony's representative stood first. His tall, elegant form moved with practiced grace as golden light rippled across his scaled skin. The Outer Rim colonization accords must be ratified, he declared, his voice carrying the authority of a species that had ruled star systems when Earth was still learning to farm. The established powers require adequate space for expansion. Sarah watched the other delegates nod in agreement. The Korthax ambassador, a massive creature covered in chitinous armor, clicked his approval. The Zephyrian Collective's 100-member delegation hummed in unison. The smaller species, those who had learned to follow the strong, added their voices to the chorus. The accords were simple in their cruelty. The elder species would divide the Outer Rim territories among themselves. Human colonies would be limited to a few dozen worlds. The younger species would receive even less. It was dressed up in diplomatic language about sustainable development and responsible expansion. But Sarah had read the true meaning in the private communications her intelligence services had intercepted. Humanity was useful, but not important. They could mediate disputes and design trade routes and solve problems, but they did not deserve equal treatment. They were servants, not partners. The human delegation wishes to speak, Sarah said, rising from her chair. Her voice was calm, professional. She had practiced this moment for months. The Veltar representative gestured dismissively. Ambassador Chen, surely we can find a compromise that serves everyone's interests. Humanity has always been reasonable. Yes, Sarah agreed. We have been reasonable. We have been patient. We have been useful. She walked to the center of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. We have mediated your wars. We have designed your trade networks. We have solved your problems for 3 centuries. The Korthax ambassador leaned forward, his multiple eyes focusing on her. And you have been well compensated for these services. What more do you want? Sarah smiled, and something in that expression made several delegates shift uncomfortably. We want nothing more than what we have already given you. 300 years of peace. 300 years of prosperity. 300 years of human blood, human sweat, and human genius poured into making this galaxy work. Get to the point, human, the Veltar snapped, his golden skin darkening with irritation. The point, Sarah said, her voice still perfectly calm, is that you have made a fundamental error in your calculations. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a simple data pad. You assume that humanity will continue to serve regardless of how we are treated. You assume that we will continue to mediate your disputes while you restrict our expansion. You assume that we will continue to maintain your trade routes while you deny us equal representation. She held up the data pad. These accords represent a clear statement of how this council views humanity. Not as partners, but as tools. Not as equals, but as servants. She touched the screen, and her words were transmitted to every delegate's personal translator. Therefore, I am authorized by the United Earth Alliance to formally announce our withdrawal from the Galactic Confederacy, effective immediately. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The Zephyrian Collective's harmonic humming became discordant with surprise. The Korthax ambassador's mandibles clicked rapidly in what Sarah recognized as confusion. You cannot be serious, the Veltar said, his voice losing its usual arrogant certainty. Humanity cannot survive alone in this galaxy. I know. I know. I know. I know. I know. Perhaps not, Sarah agreed. But we intend to find out. She walked back toward the human section. where her small delegation was already gathering their belongings. Effective immediately. All human diplomatic missions are withdrawn. All human trade agreements are terminated. All human technical support contracts are void. This is madness, another delegate called out. You are condemning yourselves to isolation. Sarah paused at the chamber's exit. Ambassador Kethvar, your species joined this confederacy because you were afraid of the Korthax Empire. The Veltar joined because they feared the rising power of the younger worlds. The Zephyrians joined because they learned that collective thinking was not enough to survive alone. She looked around the chamber one last time. Humanity joined because we believed in cooperation. We believed in building something better together. And now? The Veltar representative asked. Now we know better. Sarah's smile was gone, replaced by an expression that sent cold shivers through even the most hardened military officers in the chamber. You have taught us that in this galaxy, cooperation is weakness, generosity is foolishness. Peace is something that exists only until the strong decide they want more. The Korthax ambassador stood, his massive form intimidating even in the diplomatic setting. You speak of lessons, human. Let me teach you one. No single species can stand against the combined might of the galaxy. Perhaps, Sarah said softly, but you have made one crucial mistake in your assumptions about humanity, which is, Sarah's eyes met his, and in that moment, every predator instinct the Korthax possessed screamed warnings. You assume we learned nothing from 3 centuries of keeping the peace. You assume we were naive about the nature of the species we were mediating between. You assume that because we chose diplomacy, we were incapable of anything else. She turned toward the exit, her delegation following. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Confederacy. Consider this our notice. We suggest you find new mediators for your disputes. You are going to need them. As the human delegation left the chamber, Sarah heard the first angry voices rising behind them. The Korthax and Veltar were already beginning to argue over the newly available territories. The smaller species were choosing sides. The careful balance that had held the galaxy together for centuries was already beginning to crack. Sarah allowed herself one small smile as she walked toward the transport bay. The galaxy was about to learn something humanity had understood for millennia. Peace was not the absence of war, it was the choice not to fight. And that choice could always be revoked. Behind them, the great crystal dome continued to shine with the light of 3 stars. But shadows were already beginning to gather in the corners, and the rainbow patterns on the floor looked more like blood than light. 6 months had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council. At first, the other species had barely noticed the change. Trade continued. Ships moved between the stars. The galaxy kept turning as it always had. General Thokmor of the Korthax Empire was the first to realize something was wrong. He stood in his command center, watching the holographic displays that showed shipping routes throughout his territory. Red warning lights blinked where cargo had failed to arrive on schedule. Report, he commanded, his voice echoing through his throat chambers. Sir, 17 shipments are delayed this cycle. His aide replied. All were scheduled to use human transport vessels. Thokmor's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Contact the human shipping companies. Demand they honor their contracts. We tried, sir. The companies no longer exist. Their offices are closed. Their ships have disappeared. The general stared at the display. Humanity had controlled nearly 40% of the galaxy's shipping. They were efficient, reliable, and cheap. Most importantly, they could be trusted to deliver cargo anywhere without asking questions about the contents. Find replacement carriers, he ordered. But replacement carriers were not easy to find. The Veltar charged twice as much and refused to carry military supplies. The Zephyrian Collective would only transport goods between specific allied worlds. The smaller shipping companies were overwhelmed with new contracts and raised their prices accordingly. On the crystal world of Nexus Prime, Trade Minister Velshinara was facing similar problems. She stood before a wall of screens showing market data from across the galaxy. Every chart pointed downward. The currency exchange rates are becoming unstable, her chief analyst reported. The human-designed trading algorithms that balanced our markets have gone offline. Velshannara's golden skin darkened with worry. Can we replace them? We are trying, Minister. But the human systems were incredibly sophisticated. They processed millions of transactions every second, automatically adjusting for supply, demand, political stability, and dozens of other factors. Our best programmers estimate it will take years to build something similar, years they did not have. Already, several smaller worlds had reverted to primitive barter systems. Trade wars were breaking out as species accused each other of currency manipulation. The problems multiplied across the galaxy. On research stations, human scientists had quietly packed their belongings and left. Medical centers found themselves short of doctors who had trained at human universities. Engineering projects ground to a halt when their human consultants failed to show up for work. Lord Commander Vex Thul of the Veltar hegemony decided to take direct action. If humanity wanted to play games, he would remind them of their place in the galactic order. He assembled a small fleet and set course for Kepler's Garden, a human mining colony on the border between Veltar and Korthax space. The world was rich in rare metals that both empires needed. Taking it would send a clear message about the cost of defying the galaxy's major powers. The journey took 3 days. When Vexthul's ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, they found exactly what they expected. Kepler's Garden hung in space like a blue-green jewel, its artificial atmosphere generators creating the perfect environment for human habitation. What they did not expect was the complete absence of any response to their arrival. "Scan the planet," Vexthul ordered. "Find their defensive positions." His sensors officer worked frantically at his console. "Sir, I'm detecting no defensive satellites, no shield generators, no weapons platforms. Obviously, the humans are hiding their defenses. Scan deeper." Minutes passed. The officer's confusion was evident in his voice. "Sir, I'm detecting no life signs on the planet at all. No humans, no animals, nothing." Vexthul leaned forward in his command chair. "That's impossible. 50,000 humans lived on that world. Perhaps they evacuated when they saw us coming? Check the orbital stations. Check the mining facilities." The scans revealed the truth. Kepler's Garden was empty. Not just of people, but of everything. The mining equipment was gone. The orbital factories had been dismantled. Even the atmospheric processors had been removed. What remained was a dead rock, with a thin atmosphere that would dissipate within months. "How did they move so much equipment so quickly?" Vexthul demanded. His aide pulled up shipping records. "Sir, according to these logs, human cargo ships have been visiting this system regularly for the past 8 months. But the manifests list routine supply deliveries. They were evacuating under cover of normal trade," Vexthul realized. "While we thought they were delivering food and materials, they were actually taking everything apart and shipping it away." The same pattern was repeating across the galaxy. Human colonies that had seemed like easy targets were found to be completely abandoned. Not destroyed, not conquered, but methodically stripped of everything valuable and left as empty shells. But the humans had not just taken their own things. On New Geneva Station, the galaxy's most important neutral trading post, Administrator Kelnova discovered that critical systems were shutting down, one by one. "The main computer core is failing," her chief engineer reported. "The backup systems won't initialize." "When did this start?" she asked. 3 days ago. Right after the last human technician left the station. Kelnova felt a chill run down her spine. "How many human technicians worked here?" "All of them, Administrator. Every major system on this station was designed, built, or maintained by humans." The engineer called up a schematic of the station. Nearly everything was highlighted in red. Life support, artificial gravity, power distribution, communications, docking control, environmental processing. The humans built it all. Surely we can repair it ourselves? "We're trying, but the human technology doesn't work the way our systems do. It's more efficient, more integrated, but also more complex. And there seem to be security protocols that prevent non-humans from accessing the core programming." Across the galaxy, similar discoveries were being made. Humans had not simply been present in galactic civilization. They had become essential to it. Their engineers had designed the hyperspace lanes that allowed faster-than-light travel between distant worlds. Their programmers had written the software that managed trade, communication, and transportation. Their doctors had established the medical protocols that kept dozens of different alien biologies healthy in artificial environments. And now they were gone. In the Zephyrian Collective's hive cities, the loss of human input was causing cascade failures in their decision-making networks. Human observers had served as neutral voices in their collective consciousness, helping to break deadlocks and provide outside perspectives. Without them, the hive minds were becoming trapped in recursive thinking loops. On military bases, weapon systems that had been upgraded with human technology began experiencing malfunctions. The improvements had made the weapons more accurate and efficient, but the underlying code was incomprehensible to non-human engineers. Ambassador Krilthek of the Aquatic Council tried to contact Earth directly. His message was simple. We are prepared to negotiate new terms for human participation in galactic affairs. The response came not from Earth, but from an automated relay station at the edge of human space. The message was even simpler. This communication frequency is no longer in service. Please contact your local representative for assistance. A-Team people. There were no local representatives. The humans had taken those too. As the months passed, the galaxy began to understand the true scope of their mistake. Humanity had not simply been participants in galactic civilization. They had been its architects, its engineers, its maintenance crew. They had been so quietly competent, so thoroughly integrated into everything, that their absence was like removing the foundation stones from a building. And somewhere in the darkness of human space, behind a barrier of energy that no alien ship could penetrate, humanity was building something new. Long-range sensors detected massive construction projects, energy signatures unlike anything in the galactic database, and ship movements that suggested a fleet larger than anything humanity had possessed before. The galaxy had wanted humanity to leave the table. Now they were learning what it meant to dine alone. The first ships began disappearing 18 months after humanity left the Council. They would enter hyperspace normally, following routes that had been safe for centuries, then simply vanish without a trace. Captain Zethmara of the Veltar merchant vessel Golden Wind had been one of the lucky ones. Her ship had dropped out of hyperspace unexpectedly, but at least it had dropped out alive. Now she floated dead in space, her engines offline, her crew working frantically to restore basic life support. What happened? She demanded of her chief engineer. The hyperspace navigation system failed, Captain. The safety protocols that prevent us from materializing inside a star or planet just stopped working. Zethmara stared at the readouts in disbelief. Those systems have worked perfectly for over 2,000 years. How can they just stop? They're not actually stopping, Captain. They're updating. The safety protocols require constant updates from the Central Navigation Authority to account for stellar drift, new gravitational anomalies, and course corrections. So contact the authority and get the updates. Her engineer's skin turned pale blue with fear. Captain, the Central Navigation Authority was staffed entirely by humans. The reality hit her like a physical blow. Every hyperspace jump in the galaxy relied on calculations performed by human computers, monitored by human technicians, and updated by human scientists. Without those updates, the safety margins that kept ships from materializing inside solid objects were slowly degrading. How long before it becomes completely unsafe to travel? At current degradation rates? Perhaps 6 months before the error margins become unacceptable. 6 months before faster-than-light travel became a death sentence. 6 months before the galaxy's trillion-world civilization was reduced to individual systems isolated by the vast distances between stars. On the industrial world of Forge Prime, the situation was even worse. Director Kothwal watched helplessly as his automated factories shut down one by one. The problem was not mechanical failure. The machines were functioning perfectly. The problem was that they could no longer talk to each other. "Explain this to me again," he said to his head of production. "Sir, the factory automation systems were designed by humans 300 years ago. They've been upgraded and expanded continuously since then, but always using human-designed protocols. The machines use a form of artificial intelligence that no other species really understands. Kothwal gestured at the silent production lines. But they worked yesterday. Yes, sir. But the AI systems require regular updates to function. Security patches, efficiency improvements, new production algorithms. Without those updates, they're beginning to malfunction. Then write new updates. We can't, sir. The base code is written in human languages using human mathematical concepts. Our best programmers have been working for months just to understand the basic structure. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Communication networks that had connected billions of worlds were breaking down as relay stations went offline. The quantum entanglement communicators that allowed instant contact across galactic distances had been invented by humans and required maintenance that only humans understood. The Zephyrian Collective faced perhaps the worst crisis of all. Their entire civilization was based on shared consciousness. Billions of minds linked together in a vast network. Human psychic buffers had helped stabilize that network for centuries, preventing the cascade failures that had once destroyed entire hive cities. Queen Mind Silthera felt the first tremors of instability in the collective consciousness. Thoughts were becoming confused. Decisions were taking longer to reach consensus, and several outlying hive cities had gone completely silent. The human psychic stabilizers have been offline for 16 months, her prime advisor informed her. We are beginning to experience network degradation. Can we restore the stabilizers ourselves? We have tried, Queen Mind. But human psychic architecture is fundamentally different from our own. They think in linear patterns, while we think in collective spirals. Their technology channels psychic energy in ways that we cannot replicate. Silthara felt millions of minds pressing against her consciousness, all seeking answers she did not have. How long before complete network failure? Unknown. But several peripheral hives have already broken away from the collective. They can no longer maintain synchronization with the central network. For a species that had not existed as individuals for 10,000 years, this was a death sentence. Zephyrians separated from the collective consciousness typically survived only days before madness claimed them. But perhaps the most dangerous discovery came from the scientific research station orbiting the pulsar known as Death's Eye. Dr. Kextaler of the Reptilian Unity had been trying to reverse engineer a piece of abandoned human technology when the catastrophe occurred. The device had seemed simple enough, a small black box that humans had used to regulate power flow in their quantum reactors. With humanity gone, the other species desperately needed to understand their technology if they hoped to maintain their own power grids. The box had been designed with security protocols, but Dr. Kextaler was confident his team could bypass them. They were wrong. The moment they tried to access the device's core programming, it triggered a cascade failure that spread through the station's entire power network. But this was not a simple overload. The human device had somehow infected the station's computer systems with a virus that turned their own technology against them. Emergency klaxons wailed as life support systems began venting atmosphere into space. Gravity generators fluctuated wildly, sending equipment and personnel flying. The reactor that powered the entire facility started running at dangerous levels. Cut all connections to the human device. Dr. Kextaler shouted over the chaos. We can't, his assistant replied. It's not connected to anything anymore. But the virus is still spreading through our systems. The evacuation lasted 6 hours. When rescue ships finally arrived, they found the research station completely dark. Every computer system had been corrupted beyond repair. The quantum reactor had been safely shut down only because its emergency protocols had detected the anomalous conditions and triggered an automatic shutdown. How is this possible? The rescue team leader asked. The human device was isolated from the main systems. Dr. Kextaler looked exhausted and defeated. It wasn't just a power regulator. It was a trap. The humans must have known that someone would try to reverse engineer their technology after they left. They booby-trapped their own devices. Word of the incident spread quickly through the scientific community. Teams across the galaxy who had been attempting to understand human technology immediately stopped their work. If the humans had been vindictive enough to leave traps in their abandoned equipment, who knew what other surprises were waiting? The final blow came when the Galactic Emergency Council tried to convene a crisis session. Representatives from 43 species gathered on the neutral world of Sanctuary to discuss the growing catastrophes. They discovered that they could no longer communicate effectively without human translators. For centuries, humans had served not just as mediators, but as linguistic bridges between species. They had developed universal translation protocols that allowed dozens of different forms of communication to be understood by everyone. Chemical sense, electromagnetic frequencies, harmonic vibrations, telepathic broadcasts, and conventional sound waves had all been unified into a coherent system. Without human linguists to maintain and update the translation networks, the subtle nuances that prevented misunderstandings began to break down. What the Korthax intended as a diplomatic greeting, the Veltar interpreted as a threat. The Zephyrian Collective's attempts to share information were perceived as attempts at mental invasion. The crisis session dissolved into chaos within hours. Several species walked out in anger. 2 nearly came to blows over what was later determined to be a translation error that made a routine trade proposal sound like a declaration of war. As the galaxy struggled with cascading system failures, economic collapse, and communication breakdowns, long-range sensors detected something that chilled the blood of every military commander in known space. The energy barrier around human space was expanding. Slowly, steadily, the sphere of impenetrable energy that surrounded Earth and her colonies was growing larger. It now encompassed several previously neutral star systems. Mining stations, research outposts, and trading posts in the expansion zone had gone silent. When scout ships tried to investigate, they found the same thing every time. Empty installations with no signs of struggle. No bodies. No damage. Just silence. The humans were claiming territory, and they were doing it without firing a single shot. Admiral Korthax of the Combined Fleet tried to organize a response. We need to act before they expand further. If we allow this to continue, they'll control the entire outer rim. But his fellow commanders shook their heads. Act with what? Admiral Velcora asked. Half our ships can't safely travel through hyperspace anymore. Our communication networks are failing. Our supply lines are collapsing. Then we use what we have, Korthax insisted. And if we lose? If we attack and fail? What then? The question hung in the air like a physical presence, because everyone in that room knew the answer. If they attacked humanity now, weakened and divided as they were, and if humanity chose to retaliate, the galaxy would burn. Somewhere beyond the expanding energy barrier, humanity was building something that required the resources of entire star systems, something that had convinced the most peaceful species in galactic history to abandon 3 centuries of diplomacy. The galaxy had taught humanity that cooperation was weakness. Now they were about to learn what human strength looked like when it was no longer restrained by the desire for peace. The message came without warning on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. Every communication device in known space received it simultaneously, regardless of distance, encryption, or security protocols. The transmission bypassed quantum barriers, penetrated military networks, and even appeared on devices that had been powered down. A human face appeared on screens across the galaxy. Admiral Marcus Torres, former commander of the Human Expeditionary Force, looked older than when he had last been seen 2 years ago. His hair had gone completely gray, and new lines marked his face, but his eyes held something that made seasoned warriors uncomfortable. They held certainty. Citizens of the galaxy, he began, his voice calm and measured. 2 years ago, your representatives made a decision. You decided that humanity was useful but not important. You decided that our contributions to galactic civilization earned us tolerance but not respect. You decided that 3 centuries of human blood spilled for galactic peace bought us the privilege of serving, but not the right to equality. The transmission was being broadcast from everywhere and nowhere. Military technicians across the galaxy frantically tried to trace the source, but the signal seemed to originate from the quantum foam itself. We heard your message clearly, Admiral Torres continued. So we left. We took our ships, our people, our knowledge, and our technology. And we left you to the galaxy you wanted to create. A galaxy without human interference. A galaxy where the strong take what they want, and the weak accept what they are given. On the homeworld of the Veltar Hegemarchy, Lord Commander Vex Thul watched the transmission from his private chambers. He had been preparing for his morning meditation when every device in his palace had suddenly activated. Now he stared at the human admiral with growing unease. "We spent 2 years watching you," Torres said. "We watched your trade networks collapse. We watched your technology fail. We watched you struggle to maintain the civilization that humanity had spent 3 centuries helping you build. And we learned something important." The admiral's expression hardened. "You cannot maintain peace without us. But you also cannot accept us as equals. This presents us with a problem that has only one logical solution." The view changed. Instead of Admiral Torres, the screens now showed space, but not empty space. The void was filled with ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships, arranged in formations that stretched beyond the horizon of any single view screen. The vessels were clearly human in design, but they were unlike anything humanity had fielded before. They were massive, angular constructions that seemed to bend light around themselves. Energy crackled along their hulls in patterns that hurt to look at directly, and they were moving. Lord Commander Vex Thul felt his golden skin pale to an almost transparent shade. "Status report," he shouted to his communications officer. "Sir, we're detecting identical fleets above the homeworlds of every species that voted for the Outer Rim Accords. The Korthax Empire, the Zephyrian Collective, the Aquatic Council, the Reptilian Unity, all of them. How many ships total?" The officer's voice shook as he replied. "We estimate approximately 50,000 vessels, sir. More than the combined fleets of the entire galaxy." On the Korthax homeworld of Warrior's Rest, General Thakmor was having similar realizations. His massive form stood rigid before the tactical displays that showed human ships in perfect orbital formation above his world. Each ship was larger than a Korthax dreadnought, and sensors indicated they were armed with weapons that registered beyond his instrument's ability to measure. "How did they build so many ships so quickly?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir," his aide replied. "Our intelligence indicates that humanity possessed perhaps 3,000 military vessels when they left the Council. These ships appear to be of entirely new design." The transmission resumed. Admiral Torres appeared again, but now he stood on what was clearly the bridge of one of the new vessels. Behind him, human technicians worked at stations that displayed holographic images of every major world in the galaxy. "You wanted us gone," Torres said. "We obliged. You wanted our territories. You can have them, if you can take them from us. But understand this. We are no longer your peacekeepers. We are no longer your engineers. We are no longer your mediators." He stepped closer to the camera, and his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You have taught us that in this galaxy, strength is the only currency that matters. You have taught us that cooperation is weakness. You have taught us that survival requires the willingness to take what you need and destroy those who oppose you." The view shifted again, showing close-ups of the human ships. Weapon ports opened along their hulls, revealing energy cannons that seemed to contain miniature stars. The very space around the weapons warped and twisted as they powered up. "Class is now in session," Torres concluded. The ships did not fire. They simply waited, hanging in space above every major world like dark promises of annihilation. On the crystal world that housed the Galactic Council, emergency sessions were called immediately. Representatives who had not spoken to each other in months suddenly found themselves desperate to communicate. Ambassador Krilthek of the Aquatic Council was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. "How is this possible? Our intelligence indicated that humanity possessed neither the resources nor the technology to build such a fleet." Trade Minister Velshanara's golden skin was so pale it was almost transparent. "Perhaps we underestimated their capabilities." "Impossible," General Thakmor's voice boomed through the communication link. "We monitored human military production for decades. Their shipyards could not have produced even a tenth of what we're seeing." "Then where did these ships come from?" Krilthek asked. The answer came from an unexpected source. Queen Mind Silthera of the Zephyrian Collective had maintained silence for most of the emergency session. Her partially degraded consciousness struggling to process the crisis. When she finally spoke, her words sent chills through every delegate. "They did not build these ships in their space," she said, her voice carrying the harmonic overtones that indicated she spoke for billions of minds. "Our deep space monitors detected massive construction in the void between galaxies. For 2 years, human ships have been traveling to sites beyond our sensor range and returning empty. They have been strip mining entire star systems and moving the resources elsewhere. But that would require," Ambassador Krilthek began. "It would require complete control of hyperspace technology," Silthera finished. "Control that only humanity possessed. They have not been hiding in their space. They have been building an empire in the darkness between galaxies, where no one thought to look." The implications were staggering. While the galaxy had struggled with failing infrastructure, humanity had been constructing the largest military force in galactic history, using resources from uninhabited star systems that no other species even knew existed. "We need to negotiate," Velshinara said. "Surely they will listen to reason." "Will they?" General Thakmor asked. "What reason did we give them when we voted to restrict their expansion? What compromise did we offer when we decided they were useful, but not important?" The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Because everyone in that chamber remembered the human ambassador's final words. "You have taught us that in this galaxy, cooperation is weakness." Admiral Torres had learned that lesson well. A new transmission came 12 hours later. This time, it was not a general broadcast, but a direct communication to the Galactic Council chamber. When the representatives answered, they found themselves looking not at Admiral Torres, but at Ambassador Sarah Chen. She had changed in the 2 years since leaving the council. Her gray diplomatic uniform had been replaced by the black and silver of human military command. Her expression was calm, professional, and utterly without mercy. "Honored delegates," she said, using the formal address that she had once employed in the spirit of respect. Now the words carried the weight of mockery. "Humanity wishes to renegotiate our position in galactic affairs." "What are your terms?" Ambassador Krilthek asked immediately. Sarah's smile was sharp as a blade. "Our terms are simple. Unconditional surrender. Complete disarmament of all military forces. Transfer of governmental authority to human administration. Immediate reparations for 2 years of economic and infrastructure damage caused by your decision to exile us." The chamber erupted in shocked protests. "You cannot be serious," Velshinara shouted. "You're talking about enslaving the entire galaxy." "Enslaving?" Sarah's expression didn't change. "That's an interesting choice of words from the species that wanted to restrict us to a few dozen worlds while you divided the galaxy among yourselves. Tell me, Trade Minister, what would you call a system where one group of people serves the interests of another without equal representation or compensation?" That's different," Velshinara stammered. "Yes," Sarah agreed. "It is different. Because we are offering you something you never offered us. A choice." "What choice?" General Thakmor demanded. Sarah's image was replaced by a tactical display showing human fleets positioned throughout the galaxy. Thousands of ships, all armed with weapons that could crack planets. "You can surrender." Sarah's voice continued over the display. "Your species will be relocated to suitable worlds where you can live under human protection. You will be provided with food, shelter, medical care, and education. You will be safe, comfortable, and well treated. You simply will not be free." The display changed, showing images of devastation. Worlds reduced to rubble. Fleets burning in space. Entire civilizations wiped from existence. "Or you can fight," Sarah concluded. "And we will show you why humanity was so effective at keeping the peace. We understood war better than any species in this galaxy. We simply chose not to practice it." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Outside the crystal dome, they could see the dark shapes of human ships blocking out the stars. The galaxy had wanted humanity to leave the table. Now they were setting the terms for who would be allowed to eat. The first species to surrender was the Aquatic Council. Ambassador Krilthek made the announcement 3 days after humanity's ultimatum. his normally proud bearing replaced by exhausted resignation. "The Council has voted," he said, addressing the emergency session of galactic representatives. "We accept human terms. Our military forces will stand down. Our worlds will submit to human authority." General Thakmore's mandibles clicked furiously. "You're abandoning the fight before it even begins." "What fight?" Krilthik's voice carried the weight of despair. "Look at our situation, General. Half our fleets cannot travel safely through hyperspace. Our communication networks are failing. Our trade has collapsed. We cannot even coordinate a defense, much less mount an effective attack." He gestured toward the display screens showing human ships. "Meanwhile, they have built the largest military force in galactic history, using technology we don't understand and resources we cannot match. This is not a war we can win." The Veltar hegemarchy fell next, followed by 3 smaller species who decided that survival under human rule was preferable to extinction fighting human weapons. Each surrender was announced with the same mixture of resignation and relief. The burden of decision was lifted from their shoulders. But not all species chose submission. General Thakmore of the Korthax Empire gathered what remained of his fleets and declared his intention to fight to the last warrior. The reptilian unity joined him, as did the insectoid swarms and 24 other proud military cultures. "We are warriors," Thakmore proclaimed in a broadcast to the galaxy. "We will not bow to these jumped-up primates. Let them come." Humanity's response was swift and educational. The battle for the Korthax homeworld lasted exactly 17 minutes. Admiral Torres led the assault personally, his flagship dropping out of hyperspace directly above Warrior's Rest with a fleet of 500 vessels. The Korthax defenders numbered nearly 2,000 ships, veterans of 100 conflicts, armed with the finest weapons their military culture could produce. They never had a chance. Human weapons tore through Korthax shields as if they were paper. Their energy cannons, powered by technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics, reduced entire battleships to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. When the Korthax tried to ram the human ships in desperate final attacks, they found their vessels simply passed through their targets, as if the human ships existed in a different dimension. General Thakmore died on the bridge of his flagship, watching in horror as his proud fleet was systematically annihilated. His last transmission was a simple message. How? The answer came from Admiral Torres himself, broadcast on all frequencies as his ships moved into orbit above the Korthax homeworld. "For 3 centuries, we studied every species in this galaxy. We learned your strengths, analyzed your weaknesses, and understood your technologies better than you did. While you fought each other, we watched and learned. While you built weapons to fight yesterday's wars, we built weapons to fight tomorrow's." The orbital bombardment that followed was precise, clinical, and devastating. Military installations, weapons factories, and government centers were reduced to dust. But civilian areas remained untouched. Schools, hospitals, and residential districts were left intact, their populations unharmed. "Surrender," Torres commanded. "Your military is broken. Your leadership is gone. Your people need not suffer for the pride of their generals." The Korthax resistance collapsed within hours. Their warrior culture, built on the belief that strength determined survival, could not comprehend defeat at the hands of the species they had once dismissed as weak diplomats. The fate of the reptilian unity was even more swift. When their fleet moved to intercept human forces at the border world of Scale's Edge, they found their own ships turning against them. Every piece of human technology they had integrated into their military over the centuries suddenly activated, taking control of their vessels and weapons. Dr. Kextaler, now serving as temporary military advisor after the death of most Unity leadership, watched in despair as his own ships fired on their allies. The humans never stopped controlling their technology, he realized. All those years of cooperation, all those joint projects, they were gathering intelligence and placing backdoors in our systems. The Unity surrender came not through battle but through betrayal by their own machines. It was perhaps the most humiliating defeat in galactic history, and it sent a message to every remaining resistance faction. Humanity had been planning this for centuries. One by one, the remaining holdouts capitulated. The insectoid swarms fell when their hive queens discovered that human psychic warfare could turn their own drones against them. The crystal hegemony surrendered when human weapons proved capable of shattering their living ship minds. The Voidwalkers, masters of dark energy manipulation, found their powers useless against human shielding that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. Within 6 months of humanity's ultimatum, the galaxy was under unified human control for the first time in its history. The new order that emerged was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity did not rule through fear or oppression, but through absolute competence. Every system functioned perfectly. Every world was administered efficiently. Every citizen was provided with food, shelter, healthcare, and education, regardless of their species or former status. But freedom was a thing of the past. Ambassador Sarah Chen, now bearing the title of Director of Galactic Affairs, established her headquarters on the neutral world of Sanctuary. From there, she oversaw the complete restructuring of galactic civilization. The old system failed, she explained to a gathering of former representatives who now served as regional administrators under human oversight. Democracy requires trust, cooperation, and the willingness to compromise for the greater good. You proved that your species are incapable of these things. Trade Minister Velshinara, now reduced to managing agricultural distribution for her sector, dared to ask the question that haunted all of them. What gives you the right to rule over us? Sarah's smile was patient, almost kind. The same thing that gave you the right to rule over us for 3 centuries. Strength. The difference is that we are competent at it, and they were. Human administrators eliminated corruption, streamlined bureaucracy, and solved problems that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. War became impossible because humanity controlled all military assets. Poverty was eliminated because human logistics ensured equitable distribution of resources. Disease was conquered because human medical science had incorporated the best discoveries from every species. For the first time in galactic history, peace was not an ideal to be strived for, but a simple fact of existence. But it came at a price that grew heavier with each passing year. Children born under human rule grew up in a world where their choices were made for them. They were tested, evaluated, and assigned to roles that best suited their abilities and the needs of society. They lived comfortable, productive lives, without want or fear. They also lived without hope of ever controlling their own destinies. The older generations remembered freedom and chafed under human efficiency. But their children, and their children's children, began to accept the new order as natural. Why should anyone want the chaos and conflict of the old system when the current one provided everything they needed? On the anniversary of humanity's ultimatum, Director Chen stood before the Galactic Assembly, addressing representatives who now served at human pleasure rather than their people's choosing. Her speech was broadcast to every world in human space, which was to say, every world that existed. 5 years ago, she began. This galaxy taught humanity a valuable lesson about the nature of power. You taught us that cooperation is weakness, that generosity is foolishness. That peace exists only until the strong decide they want more. She paused, looking out at the assembled delegates who had once considered themselves her equals. We learned that lesson well. Perhaps too well, because in teaching us that strength is the only currency that matters, you created something that none of us expected. Director Chen smiled, and for the first time in years, there was genuine sadness in her expression. You turned the galaxy's peacekeepers into its conquerors. You transformed the species most committed to cooperation into the ultimate example of domination through force. Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the vast chamber. You got exactly what you asked for. A galaxy where the strong rule and the weak obey. The irony is that you never considered the possibility that you might not be the strong. She stood in silence for a long moment, then delivered her final words with the weight of absolute authority. This is the galaxy you chose. This is the lesson you demanded we learn. And now, for better or worse, class is in session permanently. Outside the great windows of the assembly hall, human ships moved between the stars in perfect formations, carrying cargo, passengers, and the promise that order would be maintained at any cost. The galaxy was finally at peace, but in the quiet moments between official duties, When human administrators thought no one was watching, some of them looked up at those ships with expressions that mixed pride and regret. They had achieved perfect order, perfect peace, perfect efficiency. They had also achieved perfect loneliness. Humanity had learned to be strong. In doing so, they had forgotten how to be weak. They had mastered the art of ruling. In the process, they had lost the ability to serve. Fear, as Director Chen had once observed, was humanity's first emotion in the dark between the stars. The galaxy had finally learned to feel it. But humanity had learned something far more terrible. They had learned what it meant to be alone at the top.